Strange but true stories, tales from the light side, the dark side, and the other side. I'm Steve White. We all need somebody looking out for us from time to time, and there are folks that need us looking out for them on occasion. Friends and family helping each other out. But could there possibly be a helping hand, a calming voice, or even an ethereal foot on the brake pedal saving you from disaster from somewhere on the other side of this earthly plane? The following two stories were submitted to us by viewers like you, who contend that they got just such a helping hand, or foot. In the early 1990s, a strange incident happened that to this day cannot be logically accounted for. It was while I was driving to work, on the weekend. Back then I lived in East London and worked in Southwest London, so the best route was straight through the center. I had driven this route hundreds of times, straight through the center, what people here refer to as the West End. Anyone who has ever been to London will know that we do not have grid-style, straight roads as you find in many other countries. Here, our roads have been formed from many years ago, starting off with footpaths, then used for carts and horses, and these gradually evolved into roads many years later. So driving in London is certainly not like many other modern cities where you have nice, straight, purpose-built roads and boulevards. Our roads go from 3 lanes into 1, then back again. Some turn left or right at any point, and yes, there is certainly no logic to it at times. But we Londoners are used to this, and for many tourists, it is part of London's character. Well, on this particular morning, it was a Saturday in April of 1990, and again I was driving into work in a diesel box-type high-sided van. It was a noisy vehicle, as it was a few years old and somewhat sluggish, so providing you kept it moving, it was fine. On a typical day, I would leave about 7 a.m., arriving at work around 7:30 or 7:40, depending on whether I decided to stop for breakfast, and if you timed it right, you could miss any buildup of traffic. Although on the weekend before midday, the only thing you had to worry about was delivery lorries or if a vehicle like a bus or a coach broke down at the wrong junction, and from tourists who just walk out on the roads as they're being dropped off from overnight coaches. But generally, the roads are very quiet at this time in the morning. I had developed a little bit of a habit where I would park outside of a McDonald's in the Haymarket and pop in for a quick breakfast, as at that time there was no traffic wardens around and it was easy to park a van, no problems. On this particular Saturday, the weather was typically British, slightly overcast, but not dull and not cold or raining. My focus was on getting my breakfast, thinking about whether I would get my usual parking spot, drive straight in, as this McDonald's would generally have many clubbers having a quick bite before heading off home after a night out on the town. It was certainly filled with some unusual characters. Because I had driven this route for many years, it felt a bit like Groundhog Day. The only thing that changed was the weather, or shop displays, and the phasing of the traffic lights. On a bad day, it would seem that every traffic light was working against me as I approached when they would turn red. It would be start, stop, all the way, and remember, these diesel vans are already sluggish. On a good day, all the traffic lights would be all green. And so far on this particular day back in 1990, it was a good day. It seemed like the gods were with me, and as soon as I hit the lights, they were green. So I had just turned off Theobald's Road into the one-way Proctor Street, and as I'm continuing down the road, I could see the traffic lights, and yes, they are all green. So I continue motoring along and pass under the building and turn right into High Holborn, where you have 3 lanes and a one-way system outside of the tube or train station. It goes from single lane into 2 lanes, and then 3, and then it turns into 3 more lanes. So I'm slightly ahead of a black taxi cab to the left of me and a small car to my right. I was in the center lane, and as I entered onto High Holborn with the station on my left, and again ahead of me the traffic lights are all green, I put my foot down on the accelerator, ready to cross through Southampton Row, hoping to make it through the lights before they changed. Just as I'm about to go through this junction or intersection, everything slowed down to slow motion. My mind was telling me to go, but my body was reacting differently. As I approached, I felt this sense of doom and danger, and it was like someone shouted to me, "Stop!" I took my foot off the accelerator and slammed on the brakes. In fact, I stopped so forcefully I ended up out of my lane in front of the black taxi cab to my left. Now, remember, the traffic light is green, and I'm now blocking this taxi cab, and, taxi drivers in London are not known for their patience. My mind kept saying go, but my body was reacting differently. As I had been approaching this intersection, I was going about 45, 50 kilometers an hour, or about 30 mph at the time, and this was not a controlled stop. I slammed on the brakes and the engine cut out. I'm not sure what came over me, but it felt like I went into a trance-like state for just a few brief moments, just inside myself, watching what was going on around me. It was eerily quiet for just a brief few moments. But then the brief quiet was punctuated by the sound of 3 cars flying past the junction, racing each other across our paths, and there's a third car that's on the wrong side of the street, motoring in what can only be described as Fast and Furious style. Despite the fact this was our right-of-way, these cars were motoring like there was no tomorrow, doing at least 80 kilometers per hour, or about 50 mph, and that is a conservative estimate. They looked like they were either racing each other or chasing each other and had blown through their red light to continue racing each other. And after they went through the light, my heart was pounding. Our green light turned to red, and the woman to the left of me got out of her small car, walked over to the side of the van, and asked me, "How did you see that? How did you know those cars were coming and that they wouldn't stop?" I unfastened my seatbelt, leaned over, rolled down the passenger side window to speak with her, and she asked me again how I had been able to know what was going to happen. And then she said that my action saved her life, and probably my own, and possibly a few others. She asked if I had a radar in the vehicle, which was a strange thing to say back then, but this was 1990, when even sat-navs and mobile phones were just still only a new concept and very expensive at the time. But she obviously didn't believe me, because as we were talking, she was leaning into the vehicle, looking at the dashboard to see what type of device I had that would be able to detect these speeding vehicles. There's absolutely no doubt in my mind that there would have been multiple fatalities, because looking back, I doubt at those speeds I would have made it through their path. Again, noting that this was a diesel box van, not a Formula One car. And if we were not hit by the first vehicle, we would have certainly been hit by the second or the third. Then the driver of the black cab pulled up close to my window, and he leaned in and was asking me about the same thing. I couldn't think clearly, because I was still struggling myself about how to digest what had just taken place, and all I could say was, I don't know. I just stopped. There was no way I could have seen these cars. For one thing, there are buildings in the way, and two, at the speeds they were motoring, it was simply not possible, unless you were already through the lights and in their path, and by then, it would have been too late. Even if you had X-ray vision, it would have made little difference. Plus, anybody who has driven an old diesel van will know that they are noisy, so it's not like I could hear the vehicles in the distance, especially with my radio going. For a few more seconds, we all stared at each other, confused. But the one thing we agreed on was that at those speeds, there would have been a fatality or fatalities. Anyone who has met a London black cab taxi driver here will know that they are never short of a word or two, and as this one drove off, he called out, "Well then, you must have a guardian angel or someone watching over you, mate." I'm now in my early 50s, and to this day, I have no plausible explanation as to what took place exactly. I've told this story to numerous people over the years and had a wide range of different theories given, many from people who do not know what they're talking about, from spotting the lights of the speeding vehicles in the corner of my eye and reacting, despite there being no clear line of sight. Another saying that I certainly heard the engines of the racing cars in the distance. But again, I'm the type of person that prefers to listen to my music, so I would always crank up the music. A 747 could have been landing behind me, and I don't think I would have heard that. To be honest, all I was focusing on at the time was putting my foot on the accelerator and getting through another set of green lights before they changed. Whether this was divine intervention, a psychic ability with a brief glimpse into the future, or as the black cab taxi driver said, a guardian angel watching over me. Nothing like that has ever happened since, and I continued to pass through that same intersection many years after. Some I have told the story to feel it's just too far-fetched. But while it may sound strange, it's 100% true. Before we get into our next story, a warning that the following story deals with the contemplation of suicide. It may not be suitable for all listeners. And if you're thinking about suicide, contact the National Suicide Prevention Hotline by calling 1-800-273-8255 or text GO to 741-741. I have a story that continues to send chills down my spine despite my experience with the supernatural. My experiences span throughout my lifetime, and I've actually run my own paranormal research operation since I was 14, digging through some family history. In doing so, I discovered some weird things that have happened to my family since at least 1692. There was even a family story about my great-grandmother's great-grandfather having the ability to move objects with his mind. So maybe I'm somehow genetically dispositioned to face these kinds of things? My paranormal research has taken me across much of the Northern Hemisphere to take on seemingly everything from UFOs to ghosts to the Loch Ness Monster, Bigfoot, and everything in between. However, one incident that took place in my hometown of Murtaugh, Idaho, is something that still haunts me to this day. In trying to learn as much about the world, I tried studying as much as I could about psychology, forensic science, you name it. And nothing in my studies can explain this, in both senses of normal and paranormal. Now, before I continue, I should warn that there are elements that might seem troubling to some, and for good reason. For those concerned, I have gone to therapy to deal with the issues that led me to this mindset, and I've gotten better. I've been able to accomplish many of my dreams and even use my experiences to help others. Last I checked, along with those I have partnered with, we're responsible for saving the lives of over 30,000 people, a number I'm proud to say continues to climb. Now, why do I choose to include that number? It's because I was told by an entity that someone I would come to grow very close to would need my help. When I was about 12 years old, my mind had entered a dark place due to abuse at home and constant fights at school. At the time, I usually stayed at either my grandparents' or my mother's place, depending on my mom's work schedule. This night, I was at my grandparents', and I was dealing with a lot of personal issues that became too much to bear. It was weighing very heavily on me, and I was preparing to commit suicide. I prepped the area, wrote out a suicide note, and had gotten ready to end it all. I let go and started to feel my life slipping away when this bright blue light appeared out of nowhere. A few seconds passed until my eyes could adjust, finding myself in another place. It's hard to describe, but I was no longer home. I looked around and found myself simply hovering in space. The light around me flowed almost like I was underwater. I was just astonished to see what was going on, and I found myself only capable of moving my eyes around. Suddenly, this man appeared in front of me. His image was blurry, but I could tell right away that it was a man with long brown hair, and he wore a long white robe. Naturally, I was concerned about what was happening, but the second I saw the man, I felt safe. I felt at ease, but also a bit of concern coming from this man about my well-being. It honestly felt like he understood everything, but did not judge. As he got closer, I could make out more details in his face. He stopped at about 5 feet away from me, and he smiled. "Dakota," he said, "there's someone here to see you." The man stepped aside and revealed to me a beautiful little girl who was crying. Her image appeared much clearer than that of the man, but what caught my attention was that I felt like I knew her from somewhere. From what I could tell, she looked like she was about 5 years old, maybe 6. She had long blonde hair, these gorgeous blue eyes, and as she got closer, it became evident she looked a lot like me. She ran up to give me a hug, and my heart just filled with guilt. I had never seen this girl before, yet a part of me felt ashamed for causing her this pain. I fell to my knees, just holding her tight, but that's not what still shocks me to this day. It's what she said while in my arms. "Daddy, please don't do it." The little girl wiggled herself from my arms so she could look me in the eyes, before lifting herself to give me a kiss on the cheek. That was when the vision faded, and I was back in my bedroom like nothing had happened. I wasn't hanging by my neck in the closet. I was sitting on my bed like I had been a few moments before. Some people I've told this story to assumed that was the last I had seen of the man or the little girl, but no, they were wrong. The little girl kept appearing near me whenever my mind had started to slip into that dark place again, just there to try to cheer me up and encourage me to keep fighting. The man I only saw 2 more times when life was really beginning to drag me down again, but somehow the vision of him was able to bring me right back up. After a few more visitations, I decided to give the little girl a name and went with the first one that came to my mind, Olivia. I managed to ask her if she was okay with that name, and she said she liked it a lot. However, Olivia didn't just appear at random times to give me words of encouragement. She also tried to warn me whenever my life was literally on the line, be it a job that had gone wrong or just moments before I was struck by a pickup truck going 60 miles per hour. Olivia even appeared to me when I was 14 years old and was watching my grandfather take his last breaths of life as he lost his fight with cancer. What's even stranger was that during his final moments, my grandfather actually saw Olivia in the room when I was the only other person who had been able to see her, a notion that shocked her and me. This led me to try researching what had happened because it seemed like no matter where I looked, no one else experienced anything like it. I started out with Olivia, basically just trying to figure out if she was in fact my daughter and how the heck it was possible she was able to visit me like she was. The only thing I was able to find were incidents involving expecting parents, normally the mother having some sort of weird dream or even a phantom visitor that turned out to be the very child they were carrying. I found a couple of incidents where it was the father who had visions of their child, but that was only because of some sort of traumatic event putting them into a near-death experience. Oftentimes, they claimed that they had no clue that their significant other was even pregnant at the time. That makes sense, but again, I was 12 at the time and hadn't even had my first kiss yet. If someone was pregnant with my child, they had some explaining to do. But what about the man I saw with her, and that I saw during times when I was pronounced dead but somehow managed to come back? There was one incident where I was going into organ failure as well as the car accident I mentioned earlier. How did he fit into all of this? I couldn't find anything in psychology, science journals, nothing of that sort, and I was hesitant when some of my searches indicated religious connotations. I didn't go to church, and I still don't unless a funeral or a wedding was involved. Eventually, I caved and consulted various figures who mentored me over the years, and they all came to the same conclusion. The man I saw was no ordinary man. He was an angel. Not just any angel, but an archangel. The Archangel Michael. If that's true, the only question I have left is, why me? Was there some sort of purpose I had, or is there a purpose that I've yet to realize? I was just a kid from a small town in Idaho. There was nothing really special about me. Naturally, the only response I was given was something along the lines of, all in due time. It's God's plan for you. All right, fine. I figured the very least I could do was try and become a man that my future daughter and future wife would be proud to have in their life. So that's what I did. I've been able to face off against nearly every threat, natural and supernatural, without any problems, and close nearly every case I come across. But this one, I've yet to solve. I've even had encounters with pagan gods. I was even able to publish a few books to pursue other bucket list dreams in the process, thanks to the connections I developed over the years. I was growing tired of searching and wanted to settle for just a hint at who Olivia's mother was. I mean, if Michael wasn't going to tell me what I needed to do, just give me something so I knew I was heading in the right direction. In March of 2016, while I was on a river cruise in France, I was given one last clue. I was standing on the top deck of a riverboat admiring the light show that they do at the Eiffel Tower. The weather was somewhat chilly, and it had started to rain, so I had the top deck all to myself while everyone else stayed below and out of the elements. Suddenly, I felt this tap on my shoulder, and I turned around to see who was trying to get my attention. It was my grandfather, who had passed away, and Olivia, just smiling. I was amazed at what I was seeing, and the fact that I was getting a chance to once again see my grandfather. I asked them why they were around, and they told me that they weren't going to be showing up as much anymore. Why? They said that I didn't need their guidance anymore, that I was on my way to becoming the type of person I was meant to become. However, they said that they would still be checking in from time to time, which they have. My grandfather looked at me, simply smiled, and said, "I'm proud of you," before disappearing. That alone made me cry, as my grandpa was the only stable father figure in my life, and really the only relative I felt had my back through everything that had happened over the years. Olivia stuck around a little longer and started to say her goodbyes. Before she left, I stopped her and asked her if she could tell me anything about her mother. She simply smiled and said, "Don't worry, Daddy. Mommy's coming soon. Just keep fighting. Mommy will need you to help her," before she faded into the night. I tell this story to not only try to give people going through a tough mental state some sort of inspiration to overcome their issues, but to hopefully try to find someone else who has had this happen to them. I'm familiar with others having angel encounters and people meeting their kids before birth. Heck, I'm working on a book that goes in depth to over 2,000 paranormal topics, but I've yet to find anyone who Olivia has shown herself to except my deceased grandfather. I thought I did meet someone whom I thought was the one, but she unfortunately passed away. I'm 23 now, and I just hope one day I get to actually see that little girl again. In Dakota, so do we, and let us know about it if you do. This has been another Strange But True Stories, submitted to us by viewers and subscribers just like you. If you have a story to share, send it to strangebutTrueStories2@gmail.com. Let us know what you thought of this episode in the comments below, and subscribe if you haven't already. Black Friday, Small Business Saturday, and Cyber Monday are all in the rearview mirror. But if you would like to buy a little something for that SBT fan in your life, visit teespring.com and search for Strange But True to check out the smallish selection of tees and hoodies. Thanks for watching this episode. I'm Steve White. Until next time.